Crime. Every morning we read about it in our newspapers, and every evening we see it on our television news. Hello, I'm David Dell, and welcome to the Crime-Free Multi-Housing Program. Now here's a thought for the next half an hour. All these criminals, the drug dealers, rapists, car thieves, home invaders, etc., where do you think they live? Where do you think the place is that they call home?
A well-established fact is that criminals are transient by nature. Generally speaking, they do not set down roots in a community. Their choice of habitation is in multi-housing accommodation. Living in apartments allows them to blend in and keep a low profile. If they feel pressured, either by police or other criminals, then they can move to a new location at a moment's notice.
Traditional crime prevention programs like Blockwatch do an excellent job because they work in the horizontal mode, and they're designed for owner-occupied single-family dwellings. But when we come to high-rise apartments, that's a whole different ballgame. Because in the horizontal mode, on ordinary quiet streets, it's easy to see the bad guys coming into your neighborhood. But with apartments, the bad guys might be already there. In fact, they could be living in the apartment right next door to you.
My neighbor was a drug dealer, and I believe his wife was a prostitute. I'm not sure, but I believe she was, because the first thing they told me when I came in, if I hear too much noise, to let them know. And noise, unfortunately, was always in the middle of the night.
Okay, about 5 years ago, when we first moved into this neighborhood, into this building, it was a little scary, mostly across the street. There's a rooming house across the way, and then there's that building just a little further down the block. And it was actually at the point where I was afraid to be walking down the street, even in the daytime by myself. And there was always police coming around the neighborhood at night and during the day for various reasons.
Well, the wonderful thing about this global village that we all live in is that we all seem to suffer from the same kinds of problems. Unfortunately, someone always comes up with a solution.
This is the city of Mesa, Arizona. Like many cities throughout North America, they had problems with criminal activity within multi-housing communities, resulting in many police officer hours lost to domestic disturbance calls. In November of 1992, the Mesa City Police Department appointed Officer Tim Ziering to head the crime-free multi-housing program. As a crime prevention specialist, Tim Ziering had looked at other similar programs, and with some restructuring and with the addition of certain incentives, the program became a success.
All across the United States, cities are growing and police forces are shrinking. That's why we need your help. We need you to watch out for your neighbors. We need you to secure your homes. We need you to lock your cars. We need you to take valuables out of your vehicles as well. Working together, we can keep illegal activity out of rental property.
This is the city of New Westminster, British Columbia, Canada. In 1995, the crime-free multi-housing program was introduced. Since the introduction, there have been some dramatic results.
In 1995, June, we brought the program up from Mesa, Arizona. We're the first in Canada to bring it into New Westminster, BC. We started with a pilot project, and we tested it out on a number of buildings, found it to be very successful. Currently, we have over 100 buildings, 100 properties that are involved in the program in various phases. One of the cornerstones of the program is to ensure that we get people out of their boxes, meaning we try to get them to know their neighbors, both on each side of them and across the halls or across the way. And we find that then people take ownership of that particular neighborhood and build good neighbors. If people are good neighbors, they'll have a tendency to stay longer. We also teach people to stand up and be counted. We say that if you won't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And that it's important to know that we, the police, only deal with 10% of the population 90% of the time. So we outnumber the bad guys 9-1. So it's important for people to realize that we, the 9, will not put up with you, the 1, out there. And that way we can ensure that people, legitimate users, have a safe environment in which to live, take ownership of their community, and feel better about the environment in which they live.
The first person in this scenario is the property owner. Notice we don't refer to them as landlords. That word has certain bad connotations. This is the person that owns the building but doesn't necessarily live there. Next is the resident manager. This is the live-in person that runs the apartment community from day to day. Next we have the residents. Notice we don't call them tenants. We believe they are partners in this enterprise, and the title reflects this. Next we have the police. They facilitate the program and advise on security and crime prevention. The benefits for the participants are as follows. The owner benefits from a more stable occupancy with less turnover, regular paying residents, less damage from disruptive residents, and thereby has a corresponding rise in the equity of the property. The property manager and the resident manager also benefit from a stable occupancy rate, as this greatly reduces stress and leads to a more harmonious working environment. The residents benefit from the reduced stress and unwanted noise, and this more peaceful atmosphere is a better environment for the elderly and for growing children. The police benefit because domestic disturbance and nuisance calls can be reduced by up to 90%, thereby greatly increasing police resources to further pursue criminals. Further benefits are from the use of crime-free signs and logos. External signs are a deterrent to the undesirables. The logo can be used in advertising to attract the desirable residents, and the certification by the police can result in lower insurance costs to both the owner and the residents of the building. The crime-free multi-housing program, like many good ideas, is fairly simple to operate. We could break it down into 3 distinct steps. Step 1 is to get the undesirable element out of the building. Step 2 is to prevent further undesirables from moving in. This is done by careful and thorough screening of the applicants and by making them aware that the building is part of a crime-free program. The third step is with the assistance of the police in determining what improvements can be made to ensure that the internal and perimeter security of the building is up to CPTED, or Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, principles and strategies.
Well, if you're a property owner, I know the thought that's going through your head. You're thinking, how much is this going to cost me? True, there are some small one-time setup costs with the program, but in the end, you will save money. Big time.
One of the problems if you have trouble with tenants or tenants who create problems is that you can end up cleaning up a big mess after they move out. You can end up having to repair damages in the building or in their suites. That's expensive. As well, you have good tenants not wanting to stay if they're having constant problems with their neighbors. And that's one of the things that we're trying to protect tenants from, is having to tolerate that as well as protect the investment of the property.
Crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, is a scientific approach to crime prevention. One of the simplest ways of achieving this is by using the principles of CPTED to manage landscaping. This is a classic example of how landscaping can attract criminals to your property. The overgrowth of trees and bushes around this apartment community made it almost invisible from the street. High-risk thieves took advantage of this and broke into many of the first-floor suites. To deter this activity, the management installed wrought iron or break-free bars in the ground floor units. But with the excess of bushes and trees and the lack of visibility from the street, the high-risk thieves simply climbed up to the second-floor units. After they joined the crime-free multi-housing program, a recommendation was made to increase visibility by limbing the trees up to at least 6 feet and clearing away any bushes that were obscuring the windows. Criminal activity was now deterred because residents could see out onto the street and neighbouring apartments could see into the property. The effectiveness of these simple landscaping improvements is evidenced by the fact that this unit has not had any break-and-enters since they joined the crime-free program in June of 1995. Just like a fire, crime needs certain elements to develop. These are known as the crime triangle. At a recent training session, Tim Ziering explained.
To understand crime, you have to understand the elements that are necessary for a crime to be committed. We understand that to have a fire, you have to have heat, you have to have oxygen, and you have to have fuel. If you can take away just one of those elements, you can extinguish a fire. In crime, it works the same way. There are 3 necessary elements to a crime. You have to have a target, you have to have desire, and you have to have opportunity. Again, if you can remove just one of those elements, you can prevent a crime. The crime-free multi-housing program is effective because it not only eliminates one, but it literally eliminates all 3 of those elements necessary for a crime.
Training sessions like these are a vital part of the certification of properties. Here, residents and property managers alike are shown the reality of the drug problem. Police drug squad officers show actual examples of seized drugs. This is vital knowledge for property managers who have to be certain of the facts when serving notices of non-compliance. In this session, some people had their first encounter with the sickly sweet smell of marijuana.
First question. Drugs are specific to certain areas of the brain. Drugs are specific to certain areas of the brain, or drugs are specific to the brain. The answer is wrong. Drugs are not specific to the brain. Drugs create dependence physically or psychologically, but not both. The answer is drugs create both dependencies. Oh, great smart group. Number 3, smoking drugs is not as bad as injecting them. The answer, smoking is the worst mode of ingestion because it causes the fastest effect. This method is the shortest route to the brain, hence crack cocaine. One person's out there. Question 4, marijuana impairs your motor skills similar to that of alcohol. The answer, wrong. Marijuana impairs your motor skills 40% more times than alcohol.
After the training session, Tim Ziering took several officers and a resident property manager on a tour of a nearby apartment, outlining the principles and strategies of CPTED.
One of the things that we're looking for on every suite is we need to have a deadbolt. Now, the preferred deadbolt is the kind that has an anti-wrench collar. In the event that somebody were to put a wrench on here and twist, this ring would just continue to go around without disturbing the integrity of the lock. The other thing that we want is an eye viewer. The eye viewer we prefer is curved. This shows that it's at least 180 degrees. On the other ones that are flat glass, it'll only be like 110 or 120 degrees, but that's okay. You don't have to change it, but we do prefer this particular type. This kind of a doorknob here is not good security because what it's got on it is a spring latch and it can be defeated with a screwdriver. The deadbolt is more effective because of the integrity of the lock itself. Let me show you what I mean. Even when the door is locked, the spring latch can still be defeated with a screwdriver or a credit card like you've seen on TV. Whereas with the deadbolt, the reason they call this a deadbolt is because the bolt is dead. You can't move it. Now there is one inherent problem with a deadbolt. If the hole that the throw goes into is not as deep as the bolt is long, the bolt will only go as far as the hole is deep and it can be pushed back in. So one of the things that we need to check is that the bolt is fully extended when the door is closed. Another thing that we like to see is that the screws in the strike plate itself go all the way through the trim wood and into the 2x4 stud that's behind. In the event that somebody kicks the door, what actually happens is this frame just cracks and gives way and the door opens.
Yep.
The door will hold, the deadbolt will hold, but the frame gives way. I can see by the size of the head on this screw that this is a large screw. I can't quite feel the other ones though because the space isn't quite there, but we want to make sure these screws go all the way through and into that frame. That way, if anybody tries to kick the door, it's the 2x4 that will hold the door shut. And you know it's very hard to kick a 2x4 in half. So overall, I'd say this is very good. You look like you're in very, very good shape right now. Take a look at your landscaping and see what we've got there. That's going to be one of the key issues. From here, what I can see is that the landscaping is just slightly overgrown. We prefer to have all the trees trimmed up at least 6 feet high, okay? That's not bad. In the event that there was a peeping Tom or a burglar there, we could still see them. But what we would like to see is that trimmed up just a little bit. This is what we call a foreseeability risk. In the event that somebody gets raped in their unit, somebody made entry behind bushes like this, they can show liability on the management's part to say you're liable because you did not provide a safe environment for me. We have a lot of lawsuits down in the States on things like that. So I'd like to see this come down as much as you can spare. Ideally, we like to see them trim below the window line. You do have an advantage, at least it's open back there for somebody coming around, so it's not real critical. In some cases, what we'll ask people to do is rather than cutting something down and risking killing it, trim it up from the bottom. So at least we can see their feet and their legs, however you want to do that. One of the things that we encourage you to do, have you been through the 8-hour training program?
Yes.
Okay. You remember when we talked about CPTED, one of the elements was territoriality, the impression that people get when they look at a property?
Yeah.
This is not bad, trust me. I have seen much worse than this. But one of the issues that we like to see is that there's a provision in the lease that just says we want you to kind of keep your area tidy. Okay. So, like if there's a little bit of garbage or litter or whatever, just have them go out and pick it up from time to time. And if you notice that there's an issue there, you might want to have them pick it up. Whenever you see a vehicle pulled backwards into a space, there is a possibility there's no license plate on the car, or there's a possibility that the license plate is expired. In some states, you don't even have a front license plate requirement. And I see 2 vehicles over there that don't even have a front license plate. Now, that vehicle may be stolen, and they're trying to cloak it so the police officer doesn't see it who might be driving by. We want to put a rule in the lease agreement that says all vehicles must be pulled in face forward with the rear plate facing so that a police officer passing by can run that license plate. If you have a rule, virtually anybody who's pulled in backwards then is going to be hiding something. But the other people will comply. Vapor lighting is very good lighting. We like mercury vapor. It gives pretty good color rendition, gives pretty good uniform lighting, so that's really good. And I noticed you've got another light fixture over there, which is very good as well. The one problem that you may have is the lighting may not be getting under the canopy of where those vehicles are parked. Now, I don't know if you've been having problems with burglaries out of automobiles or auto thefts particularly, but one way that you can combat that is just by putting in a fluorescent fixture. Right here, we've got 5 cars that are backed in, 4 of them are violations. The police department can't do anything about them because they're on private property. You, on the other hand, as a manager, because you're the sheriff of this property, you can go after them and say, hey, you're in violation. And those notices are going to show them that they have to maintain a certain level of behavior here. They know there's a new sheriff in town. Okay?
An important part of the crime-free program is the safety social. These informal sessions are crucial to the success of the program. This is where the residents and the managers get to interact with the officers of their local police department. For some residents, this may be the first time they've met an on-duty police officer on non-confrontational grounds.
As you know, every year we recertify your property by having a safety social. And the cornerstone of the crime-free multi-housing program is to get folks out of the, like I say, out of the boxes and get them out meeting one another.
The importance of the safety social cannot be underrated because not only is this a good time for the property to receive its annual certification, that is, that it still meets all the requirements of the crime-free program, but this is where residents may meet, possibly for the first time, their neighbours. With this coming together of property owners, resident managers, residents and the police, these meetings generate a true sense of community and thereby produce that most valuable of all feelings, a sense of security. The success of the crime-free program has led to its expansion from New Westminster to Burnaby, Coquitlam, Langley, and to the Fraser Valley community of Abbotsford.
In Abbotsford, we have found that there's been tremendous success in some of our real problem buildings. One of the reasons we wanted to bring it in here and try it was because we had some problem buildings, some problem properties. One building in particular that I'm thinking of where I remember the manager coming into my office and almost crying because, well, they were crying because they were just dealing with one crisis to the next. Came in, we started employing the principles of applicant screening and crime prevention through environmental design, and they had a safety social as well. And they also had 84 units, and half of them or more were vacant, and the other half of them were real problem people. What ended up happening was that after about 6 to 8 months of applying the principles of crime-free, they have decreased their vacancy rate almost entirely. Their building is full. Our calls for service were very high there, and what we have found is that the calls for service have virtually been reduced to nil in that building. Okay, we're just coming down into the old Abbotsford downtown core here, and this is the apartment building that I was talking about, the yellow one straight ahead, Anderson Apartments. They're not yet certified, but this is the building where all the drug dealers and the prostitutes were working out of. It is, we've found that they've done a total facelift of the building. This is crime prevention through environmental design, where they have improved their image. And with that, they've applied minimum criteria of the crime-free program, and they've also gone through extensive applicant screening. And they're just, the whole building, even though it's a very old building, it was one of the original ones built in the old Abbotsford area, but it's older. They've got lower-income people living there, but you don't have to be, just because you're low income doesn't mean you're a problem resident. So they've got good residents who are lower income living in the building, and it's across the street here to our right, where we'll just go around the corner here, where the mall right across the street, this is where these people were going, and they were moving into this area, walking the streets. The hookers were walking the streets here, and then they would go into the mall entrance. We'll just turn in here. And you can see that there's basically good average people that are typically using this area to come and shop and do their business. But what these people were doing is that they were coming and they were begging from these people, assaulting them while they were doing it. They would go into these doors here where the telephone booth was, and they were, calling for their drug dealers to come in, etc., etc. That has been, you talk to the business owners around here, the problem was absolutely done away with virtually because of the owner working with the police department to rid those tenants out of that building. So great success in that regard.
Possibly the greatest benefits to residents from the crime-free program is in their increased sense of security and thereby quality of life. This is Abbotsford resident Gloria Fredrickson.
I feel very confident about living in this building now. I've always enjoyed the building, but I feel very safe now that we are crime-free. Dale Cunningham, the manager of the building, came in and put a second lock on my sliding glass door off the patio. He gave me a stick to put in the window in my bedroom, and a larger peephole in the door. He took out the chain because I no longer needed it, as I could see down the hallway on both left and right of the door.
In the Greater Vancouver suburb of Coquitlam, crime-free multi-housing has already made a difference in this seniors' housing community. With just a few small, relatively inexpensive SEPTED improvements, calls for service have been reduced, and the sense of security experienced by the residents has improved immeasurably.
In this particular property that we had viewed, there was a lot of issues with the youths in the area cutting through the property and using it as an escape route, generally from the mall if they're running away from shoplifting and stuff like that. Lots of times we would get calls for service there with kids congregating in their patio area, sitting there drinking, using the patio furniture that was out. We also had the resident manager, Mike, install a gate, and what the gate did effectively was block their escape route. So they would get to the patio area, to that gate, and there was no escape. Prior to that, with the gate, they would just continue on through the door and get into the trails that were behind the property, and then they would be gone. They get into the residential area and use it as an access to go to school as a shortcut. So effectively what we've done is we've blocked access to the property, which cut down a lot on the thefts from vehicles and thefts from the carports, because the townhouses associated to the property have open carports, and the property manager was required to have the carports painted white to make them look nice and clean, and to get all of the residents to remove all of the stuff that doesn't belong in a carport, things that a potential thief would want to steal. And with the things that we've done on this property, by addressing the landscaping and access control, we've reduced the calls of service to this property considerably.
We realize that we won't be able to eradicate crime completely, but we know by your involvement in the crime-free multi-housing program, you'll end up with a more safer, more livable environment in which to exist. And together, we can make a difference.
Too many of us complain bitterly about crime and say, well, why doesn't somebody do something about it? Well, the crime-free multi-housing program is doing something about crime in over 800 cities across North America. If you want to make a difference about the crime in your apartment or in your neighborhood, please contact your local police department and ask about the crime-free multi-housing program. I'm David Dell, and thank you for watching this video.